When liberators became executioners, the Dachau incident. April 29, 1945, a Sunday morning. The sky was gray, the air was cold. U.S. 45th Infantry Division soldiers, the Thunderbirds, pushed towards a large complex near Munich. They thought they were attacking a supply depot, or maybe a factory. They had no idea they were walking into the nightmare of the century. They reached a railway track outside the complex. A train sat there, 39 cattle cars, silent, motionless. The soldiers approached the train, smelling it before they saw it. A lieutenant peeked inside one car and screamed. Inside the train were bodies, thousands of them. Men, women, children, starved, beaten, piled up like rubbish. They had been left to die of thirst and exposure. Some bodies had bite marks, the living tried to eat the dead to survive. The American soldiers were veterans, they'd fought in Italy, they'd fought in France. They'd seen friends blown apart, but never this. One soldier, a tough 19-year-old from Oklahoma, sat in the snow and wept uncontrollably. Another soldier vomited. But for most, the sadness quickly turned to something else, rage. A cold, shaking, murderous rage. They looked at the SS watchtowers in the distance. They tightened their grip on their rifles. In that moment, the rules of war evaporated. The Geneva Convention no longer mattered. Only revenge mattered. This is the true story of the Dachau liberation reprisals, the day American soldiers snapped, the day they lined up SS guards against a wall, and the day General Patton decided murder could be justice. The men of the 45th Infantry Division weren't murderers. They were farm boys, factory workers, students. They were the liberators. Before April 29, they had a reputation for being professional, taking prisoners, treating the wounded. But Dachau changed them instantly. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks was the commander on the ground. He tried to keep control, shouting orders. Keep moving, don't look at the train. But you couldn't not look. There were 2,300 bodies on that train. The soldiers walked past, seeing the dead eyes staring, seeing the skeletons. Private John Lee later said, "We were mad, so mad we wanted to kill every German in the world." They reached the main gate of the camp. The SS guards were still there. The commandant, Martin Weiss, had fled. But he left a young lieutenant, Heinrich Wicker, and about 500 SS men. Wicker knew the war was over, he wanted to surrender. He put on his best uniform, polished his boots, and walked out with a white flag. He expected to be treated like an officer. He expected a salute, respect. He walked up to the Americans and said, "I surrender this camp to the United States Army." An American officer looked at the clean, well-fed Nazi, then at the pile of starving corpses behind him. He spat in the German's face. The surrender didn't go as planned. The Americans entered the camp, chaos erupted. The prisoners saw the Americans, 30,000 skeletons rushed the fences, screaming with joy, crying, "Americans, Americans." But as prisoners cheered, soldiers hunted. A group of SS guards tried to surrender near a coal yard. They raised their hands, shouting, "Hitler kaputt." Hitler's finished. They thought this magic phrase would save them. It didn't. An American lieutenant, we think it was Lieutenant Jack Bushyhead, a Native American officer, watched them. He was shaking, he'd just seen the crematorium. He'd seen the oven still full of human ash. He looked at the SS guards, healthy, arrogant. He looked at his men. He gave no verbal order. He just gestured with his Thompson submachine gun. Lined them up. The Germans were confused, they lined up against a brick wall, about 50 of them. They started to panic. "9, Geneva Convention," one shouted. An American machine gunner, nicknamed Birdseye, set up his .30 caliber machine gun on a tripod. A sound of heavy metal clicking. He looked at the lieutenant. The lieutenant nodded. Massive, sustained machine gun fire, screaming, lasting about 10 seconds. When the smoke cleared, the SS guards were on the ground, most dead, some twitching. The snow was black with coal dust, red with blood. Lieutenant Colonel Sparks heard the shooting, ran over, saw his men firing into the pile of bodies. He pulled out his pistol and fired into the air. "Stop it!" he screamed. "Stop it! What the hell are you doing?" he shouted. The gunner looked at him, eyes blank, not sorry. He was crying, "Colonel. They deserved it." That wasn't the only incident. It was happening everywhere. At Tower B, SS guards tried to surrender, climbing down the ladder with hands up. American soldiers didn't wait. They shot them off the ladder. Fire, fire, fire. Bodies fell into the moat. Americans then walked to the moat's edge and emptied their magazines into the water, just to be sure. One GI later wrote home, "It wasn't war, it was an execution, and I didn't feel a thing. After what I saw in those boxcars, they weren't human to me anymore." But Americans weren't the only ones killing. Prisoners, the victims, wanted their turn. Somehow, prisoners got out of the barracks, weak, barely able to walk. But they had adrenaline. They found an SS guard hiding in a watchtower, dragged him down. They had no guns. They had shovels, sticks. They had their bare hands. American soldiers stood by, smoked cigarettes. An officer asked, "Should we stop them?" A sergeant replied, "No, let them finish." Prisoners beat the guard to death. They tore him apart. It was primal, it was savage. It was justice. Elsewhere in the camp, prisoners found a German capo, a prisoner working for the Nazis who beat other inmates. They drowned him in a latrine. For an hour, Dachau was lawless. The victims became judges, juries, and executioners. The US Army just looked the other way. Eventually, order was restored. Lieutenant Colonel Sparks stopped the killings. He locked up the surviving Germans to protect them from his own men. But the secret couldn't stay hidden. Photos had been taken. Photos of US soldiers over piles of dead Germans, photos of the death train. A few days later, an investigation team arrived, led by Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Whitaker. They interviewed soldiers, collected photos, and wrote a report, Investigation of Alleged Mistreatment of German Guards at Dachau. The report was damning, concluding US troops had broken international law. It recommended court-martials. It recommended the heroes of Dachau be treated as criminals. The report went up the chain of command. It landed on General George S. Patton's desk. Patton read the report. He looked at photos of dead SS guards. He looked at photos of the death train. Patton was a strict disciplinarian, usually punishing soldiers for minor offenses. But he also understood that sometimes, in war, rules must bend. He read the report, he looked at the photos. He tossed the report in the bin. There would be no court-martials, no criminal charges. Dachau had been a place of unimaginable horror. The soldiers who liberated it had seen hell. To them, the SS guards were demons. When you fight monsters, you sometimes become one. In the end, the SS guards were never punished for their crimes. But the American soldiers who killed them faced their own justice. They had to live with the memories, the images seared into their minds. The war was over, but their inner battle had just begun. Soldiers for having unpolished boots. But this was different. Patton knew what his men had seen. He knew the SS were monsters. He called the SS, the slime of the earth. He summoned the investigating officer. He held up the report. "What is this garbage?" The officer replied, "Sir, it's evidence of war crimes." Patton threw the report onto his desk. "War crimes? You walk into a place like that, you see 2,000 dead bodies on a train, and you expect my boys to follow the rule book? Hell no." Patton reportedly said, "These men were overwrought. They had nervous trigger fingers. It happens in war." Then he did something legendary. He didn't sign the court-martial papers. He took the report and burned it. Or, according to some sources, he ordered it buried in the deepest, top-secret archive file, never to be opened. He told his staff, "There will be no trial. The SS got what they deserved. Dismiss." Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander, agreed. He saw the photos of the death train. He realized putting American heroes on trial for killing Nazi monsters would destroy morale. So the order came down, quash the investigation. The charges were dropped. Lieutenant Jack Bushyhead, who ordered the shooting, went home to Oklahoma. He never spoke of it. He died in 1977, a silent hero with a dark secret. The Dachau reprisals remain controversial today. Neo-Nazis use it to say, "Look, the Americans were bad too." But historians see it differently. It wasn't a planned genocide. It was a human reaction. It was the breaking point of the human mind when faced with pure evil. When you see a child starve to death, when you see a room full of bodies, can you remain a professional soldier, or do you become an avenger? The soldiers of the 45th Division made their choice. They chose vengeance, and General Patton chose to protect them. Today, at Dachau, there's a memorial. It honors the 30,000 victims of the camp. But there's no memorial for the 50 SS guards who died against the wall. Their bodies were buried in unmarked graves, forgotten. History has judged them. They were the architects of hell. And on April 29, 1945, they met the devil. As for the American soldiers, they carried the memory of the death train for the rest of their lives. They tried to forget the shooting, but they never regretted it. One veteran said years later, "I know killing prisoners is wrong, but that day, at that place, it felt like the only right thing to do." This is the hardest question in war. If you had seen the death train, would you have pulled the trigger?